So our next speaker is Dr. Joy Malala. For those of you who would have seen Joy, she did open the conference for us this morning. Joy is a lecturer at Aston University Law School and has a special interest in researching financial regulation and supervision, the legal accountability of regulators, and corporate governance. She's also interested in the regulation of financial innovation and technology. She has particularly researched legal and regulation of mobile payment systems, where she examines this in her book, which is titled Law and Regulation of Mobile Payment Systems, Issues Arising Post-Financial Inclusion in Kenya. This book is the first of its kind, which addresses the legal and regulatory issues arising out of the introduction of mobile payments in Kenya and its drive towards financial inclusion. It also considers the interaction between regulators and technological innovation, with a particular focus on the regulatory tools, institutional arrangements, and government decision processes through the assessment of Kenya's regulatory capacity. Joy is going to be presenting today, and I think her slides should be made available if the team can make this available for her now. Just to confirm. Yes, okay, so over to you, Joy.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I apologize, I can't put my video because my internet connection is a bit unreliable, but I think you can understand this predicament. So my talk today, my very brief talk, is on the FAT digital identification guidance and its implications for financial inclusion. And my next slide, please. My focus will be on mainly three questions. And the first one will be on what is financial inclusion and who really are the excluded. And I think in previous panels, we've alluded to the fact that there are vulnerable groups, there are gender dynamics to exclusion that are not really the focus of any financial inclusion agenda. And then I will be addressing some three guidance that I think are relevant to the impact on financial inclusion, and that is the guidance that it offers. Yeah, and then I will focus on how it impacts financial inclusion. So to begin with, before we get on to the next slide, I just have been thinking critically about what financial inclusion really means and how it's projected in the discourse of developmental agencies, because there's no clear definition of what it is. And I know that that is the theme of this panel. So access to formal financial services and institutions by unbanked and underbanked people is often seen as paramount in designing strong economic policies for development, as there's evidence that there is a correlation between financial development and economic growth. And so financial inclusion has thus been recognized as a crucial determinant in financial development. With that said, I often find that in my research and from my monograph, financial inclusion is now being used or has become an axiom in international development to sort of co-opt and access markets that have previously been inaccessible. So efforts to bank the unbanked and underbanked represents a growing trend towards expanding financial markets and framing poor people as those who should entrepreneur their way out of poverty. And when you look at the FAT's guidance on financial inclusion or how they try to frame financial inclusion, it's clear to see that there is no intersectionality in their approach. And in so, even in the implementation or the guidance they offer on digital identity, it also does not highlight the particular nuances that are necessary and that impact financial inclusion. So the next slide, please. So as you can see, national identification is at different stages in many countries, from having local society and local economies to having national global society and the economy, and now to a digital society and a digital economy. And we can safely say that the digitalization process is simply transferring data from one platform to another, and therefore there are always risks, there are always challenges, and these challenges, in my opinion, have not been addressed in the way that they should have for implementation in developing countries. Yeah. So certainly digital identity is growing at a fast pace, and we've seen it through the response to the pandemic, and the issuance of this global directive by the FATF has led to a variety of ID approaches. For instance, Kenya's digital ID program, called the National Integrated Identity Management System, NIMS, was recently ruled illegal by the highest court because there was no clear documentation of the data privacy risks, nor was there a clear strategy for measuring, mitigating, and dealing with those risks. Yeah, so already we can start to see that implementation of a digital identification process can be challenging because citizens are becoming empowered and are learning about their digital rights, and they are co-opting this need for a centralized digital platform, right? We've seen also in cases in India, Aadhaar, which is the world's largest biometric identity system, have its own issues because the pushback is about feasibility and privacy again. And the nuances I want to talk about will appear in the, sorry, not the next slide, but the one after that. Yeah. Next slide, please. The one after that. Yes. So the challenges that I'm presenting are the fact that there is a lack of equal access to digital infrastructure. So not everyone has access to a digital ID. We know that because I've been in the process of trying to acquire my driver's license, because we've moved to the digital issuance of biometric driver's license, but I can't have access to it because I have to bribe several people. There's also a greater financial and digital literacy problem because citizens may not understand what data is going to be used and for what purposes a centralized system is collecting it for. Other challenges include improved security awareness and the fact that we need to prevent data exfiltration to maintain sensitive data. And one of the main sensitive data that I can highlight from a Global South perspective is that of ethnic data. So in Kenya, we have a saying that tell me your name and it will tell me who you are. So basically our names betray us, quote unquote, in that if I give you my national ID, you will automatically know my ethnicity, and that may lead to biases and prejudices which may be harmful. So these are not often taken into account when trying to enforce certain laws or certain standards such as digital identity. Now, going back to the previous slide, please. So the FATF guidance has issued 3, which I wanted to highlight very briefly. One is a risk-based approach, and I've had various panelists allude to a risk-based approach to implementation or application of the laws, and I think this is important. However, there must be an understanding what the risk is, and citizens must be empowered to know what this risk is in terms of digital identity. The other is a framework of assurances in the architecture, governance, and the systems, the IT systems. And as we've seen with the Kenyan case, the High Courts rejected the NIM system, which is also called the Huduma number, because there were no assurances that its architecture and its governance will be safe, simply because we know that sometimes this data is put in place by the state, which is powerful, in order to access informal markets for political gains. And then the other is having reliable and independent and verifiable identity, which is very, very difficult in Global South, from a Global South perspective, because identity can be formed from communities. There's no way that I could give you a direct access to my address without alluding to my community. So these are nuances that are not taken into account. And then the last slide is on possible solutions. Yeah. So one of solutions that I am proposing, which is open to critique and discussion, maybe at a later forum, is the use of digital cooperatives. Now we know what cooperatives are. They are also unions, or they are community-based understandings which allow citizens to take back their rights, and it empowers them in how they use it. And the other solution is having a people-centered approach rather than a risk-based approach in implementing digital identities to ensure that citizens understand what it is they are giving up. So thank you.